Good afternoon and welcome to episode 12 of Waypoint Connect. It's so great that you've been journeying with us and that you've tuned in this afternoon. So I hope you've got your coffee ready and you're ready to have a conversation about your first love. So for this afternoon, it's going to be slightly different every now and then. Instead of interviewing somebody, I just use the opportunity to share a thought that I've been thinking over and just been mulling over in my head. I just want to share that with you. So our topic for this afternoon is your first love. Before we start that, just a shout out from our sponsors. Thank you very much for keeping us on the air and making it possible for us to reach more people by putting this out as a podcast. So our first sponsor for this episode is the Hello Craft range of foods. Since April, it's been 2 years since they hit the shelves in our local spars and delis. And over the past 2 years, the Hello Muesli range has become extremely popular with families across the Eastern Cape, even reaching outlying towns like Prieska, Bloemfontein, and even Gauteng. Hello Craft range is made by an entrepreneurial family who wants to offer their customers quality muesli at an exceptional price. Hello is made in small batches to maintain full flavor and authenticity. Oats is the main ingredient. As we all know, oats is undoubtedly the best breakfast for a substantial, healthy start to a day. So our topic for this afternoon is your first love. This idea came out of a message that I was prepping for earlier this year. And while I was developing that message, I just realized this is a topic we need to take the time out to talk a bit more about. Now, often what I used to do is just add that in the message, but that message becomes so cluttered with so many points that we want to reach that you kind of hope you hit everything and you end up missing everything. So I decided I'm going to park that idea and I'm going to have us just take a moment to re-look at that. Now, if you're married, or if you've been in a relationship, or if you are in a relationship, this would make a lot of sense to you. If you can think back to that first date, that first moment of connecting with that special person, it's easy to forget what you've experienced, what you felt, the butterflies in your stomach kind of feeling. As years progress, as things happen in a marriage, with kids coming, it's easy to get focused on other things. Now, that relationship is always very important to you. It's always very special. But your focus tends to shift and drift. And that's why something like date night is so important, to just carve out that special time with that special person in your life. But here's the challenge. Life gets in the way. And it's easy to forget that first love, that first moment, that feeling that you had, that connection with that person, and get so caught up in life. Now, there's a book that I want to take us to in the New Testament. So I just want to, before we engage with that, just take a moment and say, if you're not in a relationship with God yet, you're completely off the hook, because this for you would just be an interesting conversation, and that's 100% fine. And I hope you'll get a new perspective on what God is calling us to when He talks about relationship. But there's absolutely no pressure on you. For us that are in a relationship with Jesus, the idea is that we just get a fresh perspective on this relationship. Now, the book I want to take us to is the book of Revelation. It's the last book in the Bible. It makes it easy to find if you're not familiar with your Bible and the pastor asks you to open up your Bible at Revelation. It's easy. Just go to the last book of the Bible. The challenge is, if you speak to a lot of Christians, what you'll find is they avoid the book of Revelation. Why? Because it's difficult to understand. Part of our challenge is that we kind of think that the Bible is one book. That's our first mistake. The Bible is made out of 66 books, 2 parts, Old and New Testament. And we find different types of literature inside of the Bible, but we kind of think that they're all the same, they all mean the same, and we engage with that text the same. Now, when you read a poem and when you read a narrative, you engage with it differently because the author uses different tools to convey the message. Symbolism is much more important in poetry than it is in narrative, even though it's still present. And so with Revelation, we find this challenge that Revelation is actually prophetic literature. So it's a vision of what is to come. It's prophetically speaking into what is not there yet, but what God is revealing. And for us, it's difficult to engage with literature like that because when we open up the paper, there's absolutely no prophetic literature in the newspaper. When we read books, we don't read prophetic literature. So we need a different tool set to engage with Revelation. And because of that, a lot of Christians avoid the book. It's not their go-to, and if you're new to faith and engaging with the Bible, it's not the place to go to. You're going to get lost in Revelation. But the first tool I want to give you is understand that this is prophetic literature. So your first then approach is understand the symbolism. Symbolism is a heavy used tool inside of the book of Revelation. And the best place to find what the meaning of those images and the symbols inside of Revelation is Revelation itself. Because we don't engage with the whole text, we miss where there's reference of, let me explain this to you, this is what it means. And we try and fill in the gaps of what this is supposed to mean. And that's the first and the best place for us to find meaning within symbolism. So I want to start with Revelation 1 verse 10. And John is the author of Revelation, the disciple John that planted some of the first churches, and that's why he became the Apostle John. His title changed, even though titles aren't that important, but in terms of understanding what the difference is between John the disciple and John the Apostle, it's the same person. It's just referencing a different phase that John was in. So John's capturing this. And he said in the beginning of Revelation, on the Lord's day I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet. So this is a vision that he has, this is an experience that he has, and he captures this for us. And this voice said, write on a scroll what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe, reaching down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest. This son of man is Jesus, because we often in the New Testament have Jesus refer to himself as the Son of Man, and Paul referred to Jesus as the Son of Man. So it's clear to us from that this person that John sees is Jesus. And what I'd encourage you to do is just read the rest of the text and just visualize how he sees Jesus. And he continues in verse 16. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. And this is where we find the meaning. Verse 20. The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and of the 7 golden lampstands, is this. So we see this image, we see the symbolism, and we ask, what does it mean? But we miss, because we stop reading, we give up. But then in verse 20 it says, the mystery of is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Now the angels of the 7 churches is another way of saying that's the pastor leading that church, the person responsible for that church. Now I just want to pause there for a second. So this message was given to John specifically for those 7 churches. So it's not just, let me just give you a message, you pick out of it what applies. And I just think it's a phenomenal concept to think that Jesus would come and give a direct message to John for those specific 7 churches. Now, in that, I'm not saying they're the only churches that Jesus will speak to. What I am saying is this is a template to understand that Jesus will and can give a specific message to your faith community. Not just a general one, but specifically for your faith community. If you're leading a faith community, how amazing is this comfort that's there, that Jesus is holding you as the spiritual leader of that faith community in his hand. He knows you personally. You're not just somewhere, a random person, a random number, but Jesus knows you. And then we get to the section that I want to have us talk about, which is Revelation 2, verse 1, where we find one of the letters addressed specifically to that faith community, a message for them specifically. And this is for Ephesus, big trading city, very, very well known in those days, and a lot of affluent people. To the angel of the church in Ephesus, write. In other words, write the following. These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. Small detail, big significance. The star is held in Jesus' right hand. It's not just any hand, it's not the left hand, the weak hand, it's the strong hand. The hand that's able to work, do things, and act on. And that star is kept in Jesus' right hand. I know your deeds. And then again, before I continue, again, small detail, big significance. Jesus walks among the 7 golden lampstands. It shows us that Jesus is actively involved and present and with that faith community. And that's true for our faith communities today as well. And then he writes, I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. Now, if we were a faith community and Jesus spoke those words about us, man, we'd be so proud of ourselves. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles, but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name, and have not grown weary. It just gets better. So we would like to find ourselves in that space where Jesus commends us on our hard work, the suffering that we've endured. But it continues, yet, it's just another way of saying, but, yet, I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Here we have a faith community that's so sold out to Jesus. They're willing to sacrifice for him. They are sacrificing for him, because there's a difference between I'm willing to and I am. They suffering and sacrificing for Jesus. And Jesus sees it. He acknowledges it. But what Jesus is saying, you've lost your first love. You have forsaken the love you had at first. And I want to relate this to what we spoke about at the beginning in terms of relationships. When Jesus speaks about relationships, he speaks to us about relationships that we experience in words that we understand, that we know. For us to think back about that relationship that's so special to us, that first moment of that relationship. As life moves on, we kind of lose the excitement about that relationship. We get so caught up in the everyday of everyday life that we forget how special this relationship is, how amazing this relationship is. And this is just Jesus coming and saying, I'm not condemning you, I'm not judging you, but I am being open and honest with you. And in that, I want to use that opportunity to leave that thought with you as well. Not bring you into a space of judgment and say, but where are you in terms of this? And are you living this? But say, in the chaos and busyness of life, just take a breather, take a moment, take a second, have a coffee with yourself and ask yourself the question, have you lost your first love for Jesus? And this is the point that I want to get to. A build up to that is, within our culture, it's weird for us. When Jesus speaks and God speaks to us about relationship, it's always intimate and personal, but never private. And within our cultural context, we kind of equate personal, the fact that I'm emotionally involved in this. I'm bought in, I'm sold out. We connect that personal aspect of that relationship with it being private, and we don't want to share those stories with people. We don't want to talk about it with other people because we think it's supposed to be private. But God never had the intention for this relationship to be private. Always intimate and personal, but never private. And with that in mind, the thought that struck me as I was preparing for that message is this question: are you in love with Jesus, or are you in love with the idea of being in love with Jesus? Now, it might seem like an insignificant difference, but it's actually a big difference. What we're saying is, if you look at it at face value, now there's an amazing Afrikaans saying for that, op die keper beskou. So if you look at it at face value, it's the same thing. You would do exactly the same things you've been doing. But the big difference is, what's the motivation that sits behind it? Are you connecting and doing what you're doing because it's comfortable, you're connecting with great people? Or are you doing it because you've connected with Jesus in a personal way? You've experienced Jesus. You've experienced for yourself what that means to be in that relationship with Him, to have Him with you every single step of every day, to have Him present in the difficult decisions that you have to make. Is that why you're doing what you're doing? Or is it because it's comfortable? You think it's just another way of pleasing Him? Kind of racking up credit with Jesus so that when you need a favor from Him, you've got some credit with Him to actually pull on and rely on. It's an uncomfortable question. And luckily it's not one that you have to justify towards me. And we're having kind of like a one-way conversation at the moment. So you can be really open and honest with yourself. But it's an important conversation to have, because that conversation is in your own interest. Because when we do things that seem like the right things, but we're doing them for the wrong reason, we're missing out on so much. And Jesus doesn't want us to miss out on that. He wants us to fully walk in a closeness with Him. And here's the amazing part. If this becomes true for us, we become infectious. Now, it's a word during the past year with COVID that's got a negative connotation. So I want to use that in a positive connotation, where you have a positive influence and effect on people. People can't resist the effect of that in their life when they in your presence and they experience something of what you're experiencing in your walk with Jesus. So what it also robs us of is, it robs us of the ability and the possibility that we have of sharing Jesus with people. Because we need to ask ourselves the question, what I've got, is that worth sharing? Would somebody else want what I've got? And if it's a job and a tick box, then that's not something that somebody else would want. But if it's, I'm passionate about this, not because I want to please Jesus, I know that He's pleased with me. But I do this because I love Him and I cherish this relationship. And He's given everything for me, so I just want to give back to Him what I've received. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I want other people to experience the same. People will pick up on it, and people will respond to it, and people will be drawn in by it. So that's why I'm encouraging you this afternoon, and not condemning you or judging you, but I'm encouraging you to reassess, reevaluate. Just have a coffee with Jesus. Get some feedback from Him. Talk to Him. And just make an adjustment. You'll know what that adjustment is for you. If you need somebody to talk to, feel free to reach out to me. We'll have a coffee together. We'll have a chat about it. And if for some reason this message resonated with you and you're like, I haven't taken that step yet, it's something I'm considering, it's something that I would like to experience, what I'd like to invite you to is to our next starting point that's running from the 3rd to the 6th of May here at our venue. The focus of starting point is re-engaging with faith, the whole conversation around faith. And it's not designed to convince you of something, but it's designed to create a space where we can ask the uncomfortable questions, where you can come and bring your questions and say, how does this match up what I've experienced to what Jesus is trying to say? So starting point is let's re-engage around this topic and conversation of faith. And let's sit around a table and have a conversation around faith. So if you've got questions, you're not experiencing this, but you would like to, then that's the place for you to join in a conversation around that. So feel free to join us for starting point 3rd to 6th of May. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. I hope you enjoyed it as well, that it inspired you. It's given you encouragement and hope and motivation for what's coming up and what you have to face in your life. And I also want to thank The Cradle as our second sponsor for this episode. The Cradle is a supplier of anything artistic, from ceramics and sculpture to sugar art and cake decorations. They do it all. The owner, Rochelle Hichu, graduated with a visual arts degree, majoring in sculpture in 2019. The Cradle's mission is focused around Romans 8 verse 28. Those called according to His purpose for them. And how perfectly does that not link in with our message of this afternoon? So you've got an open invitation to have a conversation with me, with somebody on staff, and to be part of starting point 3rd to 6th of May. And the last thought I want to leave you with is have a great week.